we are really pleased to welcome you to this new IFP School Voices webinar. The presentation of our guests will be divided into two parts with two Q&A sessions. So please feel free to write your question in the Q&A module. And for tonight, your questions will be raised by Kristell Guizouarn. Kristell is an IFP School student enrolled in the Energy and Products program. So let's start right now with our Dean, Mrs. Travers. So Christine, the floor is yours.
Dear alumni, students and colleagues, welcome to everyone and thank you for joining us for this 20th IFP School Voices webinar. Maybe it's useful to present again very quickly these webinars. They address subjects mainly related to ecological transition in our four main sectors: geo-resources, processes, economy and management, and sustainable mobility. And during which alumni talk to alumni and students, but not only. We are also very happy to welcome colleagues from IFP Groupe and from our industrial partners. All the previous webinars have been very successful thanks to your loyalty, dear alumni. You are our best ambassadors. They have undoubtedly strengthened our network, but it's still not enough. We count on you to relay the information around you. This 20th seminar is also an opportunity for me to thank the staff of the school who are strongly involved in making them a success, and especially Sabine and Melling. This 20th webinar is very promising, and it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Kristell Guizouarn. Kristell holds the position of Group Regulatory Affairs Director at AVRIL since 2022. Kristell is an IFP School graduate in Petroleum Product and IC Engineering, class 2006. She holds an engineering degree in agronomy with a specialization in environmental sciences and is a postgraduate in agronomical sciences. In 2005, Kristell joined Diester Industrie, Saipol, first European biodiesel producer. In 2007, she was appointed Research Development and Quality Manager. Kristell is involved in the standardization works at the French and international level for biofuels and sustainability issues. She was Group Sustainable Development Director for AVRIL from 2011 to beginning on 2018. Since 2018, she has been the President of the European Biodiesel Board. She was Chair of the French Biodiesel Board Esterie France from 2012 to 2022. Since 2022, she is the Group Regulatory Affairs Director at the General Secretariat of AVRIL. In September 2015, she received, on behalf of the French magazine L'Usine Nouvelle, the Sustainable Development Woman Award, as well as the Woman of the Industry Award. Tonight, Kristell will address the role of biofuels in the decarbonization of transport. So Kristell, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good evening. I would like to thank the IFP School team for giving me the opportunity to share my experience as alumni, I would say, through one main topic, which is the role of biofuels, with a focus on biodiesel, of course, in the decarbonization of transport, with a global view from the starting point to the situation now and the perspective. So I propose to start with the upstream of biodiesel value chain. So from seeds, rapeseed, through crushing, meaning production of vegetable oil, oilseed meal, to the different outlets. So biodiesel value chain is part of a global sector. This sector model is at the heart of AVRIL's funding project. To serve this model, AVRIL relies on its two business lines. First one, it is what you see on the screen. It is the industrial business line deployed from upstream, so rapeseed, sunflower seed, to downstream in different sectors: agri-food, animal feed, oleochemistry, and of course, renewable energy with biodiesel. And the second business line is a financial business line through our subsidiary, Sophie Proteol, which supports companies in the agricultural and agri-food sector with minority shareholdings and loans. So now, to understand, so now to understand that AVRIL is an international agro-industrial group founded 40 years ago at the initiative of French farmers, and it is present in 19 countries with more than 7,000 employees. In 2021, sales revenue amounted to 7 billion euros. So the portfolio of AVRIL is quite diversified in several markets in Europe, in Africa, and in France. You will know AVRIL Group through Le Sieur or Puget or Oleo 100, so many well-known brands. But biodiesel is at the heart of AVRIL Group activities. So in order to produce biodiesel, it's quite easy. With a seed, you crush the seed, you obtain 60% of meal protein, which goes to animal feed. It's a majority of the seed, and you extract 40% of vegetable oil. This vegetable oil goes in priority for edible oil, so Le Sieur, for example, but we have more vegetable oil than what we need for human consumption. That's why we developed the biodiesel through transesterification. What is transesterification? It's quite simple. It's a reaction between an acid oil, I would say, veg oil plus 10% of methanol. It gives biodiesel and 10% of crude glycerin. That's why we are so involved in chemistry from vegetable resources. So you have the overview of the production of biodiesel, and now I will try to share with you the story of biodiesel. Because at a starting point, it was written in 1992, but when I prepared this conference, I discovered that it started in 1987 with IFP, of course, I knew, and Total, and Diester was a brand which was launched in 1990. It was a French innovation. So biodiesel, it's a French innovation. And the first plant in France was in 1988. So it's quite an old story. And at the starting point, the question were much more for R&D quality aspect. It was very important because it was innovation. And it was at a time after a Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was there in order to reduce the one set of global warming by reducing GHG in the atmosphere. And so there were different ways in order to start decarbonization of transport, especially of road transport. And for AVRIL, it was the possibility to have to develop an outlet for veg oil that was needed. Why it was needed? Because we needed to reduce our protein dependency from the US. That's the reason why we developed rapeseed and sunflower in France. The main reason was to have protein for animal feed. And the consequence was a very big amount of veg oil. And through innovation, biodiesel was there in order to create value from this veg oil and to decarbonize road transport. So my first job, even as I was internship inside the group, was to work on process and technical issues, because of course, when you develop a new product, and we tried to have no impact, no negative impact, I would say, on engines and on gas oil, we had to work a lot on oxidation stability of the product, on cold flow properties, on the usage of this new product, and of course, to develop an increasing target of biodiesel into diesel fuel. And what helped at that time was really regulation, because from 2003 to 2005, it was a promotion of biodiesel. Promotion of biodiesel at European level and promotion of biodiesel at national level. So it was a big big impact on the industrial development in France and in the EU. And a lot of work was done with automotive manufacturers, petroleum companies, IFP, in order to develop standards at European level, in order to allow more than 5% FAME, it's fatty acid methyl ester, it's biodiesel into gas oil. So we developed B7, 7% of FAME, 10% B10, B30 with all the stakeholders. So it was a very positive aspect and positive period. Afterwards, it was a little bit more complex because, of course, we were the EU leader in biodiesel, but there were some new debates, and we faced with new debates with competition, food versus fuel, deforestation debate. And the market was a global one with palm oil, with soy, with at worldwide level. And at that time, as it is a regulated market at EU and national level, those debates had an impact on regulation with the Renewable Energy Directive, on the implementation of sustainability criteria in order to be sure that there was no deforestation entailed by the production of biofuels, and that greenhouse gas emissions were really calculated from farmer to final consumption. So it was not the same market at that time, and the revision of EU regulation with a cap at 7% maximum food feed crops biofuels in 2015 was quite difficult for us because we were a leader and we had to close some plants at that time. So through sustainability criteria implementation, I had the opportunity to take responsibility for sustainable development at group level and to discuss with new stakeholders, especially with NGOs. And it was very important to understand the reason why there were some debates on food, feed, deforestation. And in any case, people at the Commission, the European Commission, or even at French government, they take into account those debates. And in RED II, it was decided, in fact, to solve the issue of certain feedstocks for biofuels with a decision to phase out palm from biodiesel and to focus much more on waste and residues. So this period was challenging, I would say, but a lot of things were done for passenger cars, I would say. And now, and we will discuss this topic, we are in RED II, so Renewable Energy Directive 2, but it is under revision since the Green Deal, so since last year, and with a lot of challenge and opportunities for all the industry and of course for us at the same time.
Thank you, Mrs. Guizouarn, for this interesting first part. First of all, I just want to present myself. I am Kristell Guizouarn, so I'm also Kristell, and I'm a student at IFP School at the program Energy and Products. So I am so happy and glad to be part of this webinar. And I will be the spokesperson for the IFP students. So I will ask you their questions. So let's start with the first question. So, with high prices for diesel fuel today, what is the situation for biodiesel first generation? Is it cheaper?
Good question. What I can say is it's never cheaper. It's because when you produce biodiesel, you know, you need to produce first feedstocks on agricultural feedstocks. On some, for example, fertilizers are used in order to grow feedstocks, and fertilizers are produced with gas, for example. And then the farmer, in order to produce rapeseed, will need to use some engines with fuel. So at the end of the day, what the first part of my answer would be, the price of the feedstock is much higher. But it's good news for farmers, and you know we are well integrated with farmers. So this part is good news, but we buy at a higher price our feedstock. And then we also have industry, and we are consuming some energy in order to transform rapeseed and sunflower seed into veg oil and then into biodiesel. So we are impacting in terms of cost of production. So the cost of our biodiesel is higher than usual. The answer compared to diesel fuel, I would say it would depend on the price at day to day. Mostly not, because we are selling not one day, but some months before. There are some indexation with diesel prices. So it's much more complex than just the price one day in order to sell, I would say, more than 1 million, between 1 and 2 million tons of biodiesel every year. So we have some traders specialized for feedstock, specialized for diesel, and we try to do our best. I would say that, yes, we earn money, but it's not because of the crisis. It's much more because of position on feedstock trading platform, on diesel trading platform.
Thank you for this first question. The second question is, so it's from Thierry Destruo. What is the GHG difference in percentage between biodiesel and fossil-based diesel?
Okay. Thank you for your question. So greenhouse gas emission balance of, I would say, standard rapeseed biodiesel, the reduction it's 60% compared to diesel fuel comparator, which is a fixed value for diesel. And we can go, we can have very high figures, very high reduction. I will present them just after, because we improve agricultural practices and also our industrial process in order to optimize and to have the best reduction of GHG, even for rapeseed biodiesel. So said, I would say first generation biodiesel. So we are working every year in order to improve this figure.
Thank you. The third question, it's from Bruno Lestrade. So he say, in the beginning, the DSL was using methanol coming from fossil fuel. Any developments on using biosourced ethanol instead of fossil methanol to produce biodiesel?
The answer is yes. I think, I don't want to say something wrong, but I think we have one supplier with some green methanol, biosourced methanol. There's not a big availability of this kind of methanol, and of course, it's the price is much higher. But yes, we always try to improve even our GHG balance. Methanol is fossil, so it has a negative impact of the balance. And globally, try to use only, if possible, biosourced feedstock. It's not the case for methanol. Most of methanol is fossil, but we have some green methanol, but with small quantity.
Okay, there is a lot of questions. So the next question is from Dalbenas Etienne. So the question is, what is your insight on the B100 potential in France, blended with the super fame rape seeds only?
So B100 is one of the products that we have developed with an offer called Oleo 100 in France. So it replaces diesel fuel, especially for heavy duties. It has been allowed in France in 2018, so it's a new market, I would say, for captive fleet. So with a specific storage of the customer. This year, it's some, I would say, between 10,000 and 100,000 tons of B100. The perspective would be around 300,000 tons or maybe more, but it will be limited because there is a limitation of feedstock, and we want to keep Oleo 100 with French rapeseed. only with full traceability from farmer to final consumer.
Thank you. The next question is from Gabriela Gruber. She says, with the increasing demand for biofuels and SAF, will the capacity of crops in Europe will be enough? I think that mainly Asia will be competitive with a higher CO2 load in terms of life cycle.
In fact, everyone wants to discuss the next part, but I will answer. Concerning SAF, so sustainable aviation fuel, of course, there is a question of feedstock. There is a discussion on regulation at European level called Refuel Aviation with very ambitious targets for decarbonization of this sector. Concerning feedstock, the big challenge is not to increase feedstock from food feed crops. But even I can tell you that in the project from the Commission, the draft, it's excluded to use food feed crop for aviation. We'll see the ending point, but it's much more based on waste and residues or new crops than the present one. So is there enough feedstock? I would say you should ask the Commission with the targets. There will be a big challenge. And I'm quite sure that it's not only through biofuels that decarbonization targets for SAF for aviation will be reached. So there will be part of SAF, but also some e-fuels, also different categories, but it's challenging. Yeah.
Okay. And the next question is, it's from Alexandre Donzel. So he said, due to energy transition pushing electric and hydrogen energy, automotive industry off-road as the main technical solutions, do R&D investment on biofuels will decrease in the short future?
I don't think. Why? Because I agree that for passenger cars, it will be much more electrification. But for other sectors, for heavy duties, for maritime, for aviation, you need liquid fuel for a transition period with because they need some power, they need some autonomy. So it will be liquid fuel. So the way to decarbonize the easiest would be biofuel. So there is a lot of research and development on those sectors in order to use biofuel as a transition solution. Of course, it will be a mix, but for hydrogen, for example, for hydrogen for aviation sector, it will be maybe, I don't know when, 15, 20 years, but in reality, for the next 10, 15 years, there will be a lot of R&D with biofuels in order to replace fossil fuel for new sectors. So I think I started to answer this question, but what I wanted to share with you is there is a third generation of biofuels, of biodiesel. But what is done since many years is to improve what exists and not try to kill what exists, and to improve especially greenhouse gas balance. So what you can see on the left side is the greenhouse gas balance of biodiesel from rapeseed. On the blue part is emission from its protoxide. In English, I don't remember, but it's protoxide d'azote, meaning that the blue and the green are only from farm practices. So what we can do, of course, is to improve industry practices, which is the pink color. And we've done it replacing, I would say, for example, gas with biomass to produce heat, for example. But our main focus now is to first reduce the impact at farming level, meaning changing some agronomical practices, And the second one is to store carbon at farming level with some specific agronomical practices. Doing that, when I've answered that the greenhouse gas emission balance was minus 60%, you can go to a neutral minus 100% balance when you have some storage of carbon, but of course with certification, with very specific practices. So I would say that the first important thing to do is to improve what is already there and not to replace every solution with another one with the transition, with energy transition. So it is how we can produce first generation with very different greenhouse gas emission balance than 10 or 20 years ago. So the first part is really improvement. I would say second part is perspective. Why perspective? Because with the Green Deal is a real opportunity because it has been published last year on the aim at EU level of this Green Deal is really neutrality for green emission balance. So it's a strong political ambition. And when there is a strong political ambition, I can tell you that you have strong regulation. Those regulations, of course, are complex, but I would say they are very interesting because with electrification is a reality for passenger cars. There will be electrification, but all the biodiesel that was used for passenger cars will be available for heavy duty and feedstock available for other sectors. So today, B100, the question on B100, it's only for heavy duty. It's not for passenger cars. The development, the technical development we've made with OEM was for B7, for B10, for compatibility, but not for B100, which was only with heavy duty manufacturers. So it's one way to go for energy transition is to create solutions when there are some needs and when electrification is much more complex and power is needed. The other sector would be rail transport. It's already the case for some with SNCF in France when electrification is not feasible, meaning that in some cases, the question is, do we have any transition solution or should we stop, the line? On the B100, on the Lalanne 100, which is a brand of AVRIL Group, is used today on it works. Of course, there are some questions, some tests which were done, but it's one way to decarbonize now and not to wait for something in the future that will come in any case. We also worked on energy transition for heating oil. In France, in fact, you can use heating oil now with new equipment only if there is a reduction of CO2, which is written in the legislation. So we've worked with French administration, but also petroleum refiners and biofuel producers in order to develop new standards, which are French one, F10 and F30 with 10% and 30% of biodiesel inside. Then I would say the main challenge that I see is SAF. So the question has been raised, is SAF and feedstock? Because in France, there is already a target for SAF since beginning of this year. So it's interesting, all the players are working together with same questions than 15 years ago for passenger cars. Compatibility, so for compatibility, it's international certification. For products, it will be much more HVO biodiesel than faint biodiesel, of course, with very nice behavior at cold, on the high, on hot temperature. And there is the same debate at European level with refuel aviation regulation, because with the Green Deal, all the sectors need to contribute. Even if it may appear as more complex, it will appear in any case. So the question is much more to see how to find solution than to fight against this political ambition. There are also some questions for maritime. Biodiesel can play a role, but is it the best solution to replace crude oil with biodiesel? We're not sure. There are we can contribute, but maybe there are other alternatives which would be much more efficient. But it's a question that we need to tackle. It's which feedstock, which usage, because we have some limited feedstock, even at worldwide level. Crop, food crop or not food crop, waste and residues. For which usage? Should we only use waste and residues for SAF, or should we say that the market will decide on which is the best usage of a feedstock for biofuel? We also develop new feedstock with no additional land use. It is the case in France with what is called intercrop. When the soil has nothing, you can grow some new crop with a very limited period in order to have an additional production and with environmental benefits. What I've said and what is true for every sector will be the importance of greenhouse gas emission savings on certification. And not only reduction, but also carbon storage at farm level, because in fact, I would say 30%, not 30, 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emission of biofuel comes from farm level. So this regulation is an opportunity. It's of course very complex. Just for us, for the energy part, it is 13 new regulation or revision of regulation during this year, and it's not finished yet. And there are other revision on other texts for every sector, food sector, feed sector, everything, and automotive sector. But at the end of the day, what I would say is it is, 10 years ago, everyone would say there is competition between electricity, biofuel. Today, there's no competition any longer. There will be an energy mix, there is a big challenge in order to reduce greenhouse gas emission and to find solution. So really with R&D, there will be a lot of solutions. But with Green Deal, things are not finished. Because of the war in Ukraine, you know that it has been decided to have another package, which is called Repower EU, how to try to use less gas from Russia, less diesel fuel from Russia, and to develop again some autonomy in terms of energy, not only renewable, but energy globally. So there will be also this challenge in the next years, meaning that everything which is under discussion this year would be again rediscussed in order to see if it contributes to Repower EU or not. So you see that there are a lot of perspectives in terms of usage of biodiesel for new sectors. So it means new stakeholders, which is really interesting. 15 years ago, I was discussing with, of course, Renault, PSA, Stellantis on Total. And afterwards, it was for B100 with Renault Trucks, with MAN. For SAF, it is much more with Safran and Air France, and maritime with CMA, CGM. So you see that stakeholders are really different. And it's a pleasure to develop at the same time technical issues, but also regulatory issues with those new environment, with new players, but with the same challenge it is to decarbonize transport sector.
Thank you, Mrs. Guizouarn, for this interesting second part and presentation. And now let's start with the questions. So, there is a question from Thierry Detruot. With car industry moving to EV, do you see another market for oilseeds processing? Can it replace in the future fossil feedstock to make petrochemicals?
Yes, in fact, it's already the case for some petrochemical products. What I've said is first, when you produce biodiesel, you produce vegetable glycerin. And with glycerin, you replace a lot of fossil products in different applications. It's for cosmetics, of course, but it's also for lubricants. And we work a lot on R&D with glycerin, but not only glycerin, from veg oil. There are a lot of application on Inside AVRIL Group, we have a subsidiary, Oleon, which was earned by Oleofina more than 20 years ago. And so for us, chemistry from renewable sources is one of our main development for the future to replace petroleum products.
Thank you. So the next question will be, the aviation sector might call by 2030 must for the eligible feedstock with refuel EU. How the equilibrium will be done with other segments, knowing that electricity just starts and there will be still a high share of thermal vehicle by 2030 in the global fleet?
It's a very good question, because there will be a period during 10 years for the feedstock, with some question for the feedstock for aviation fuel, to do the good choices. And maybe the good choices for the next 10 years will not be the same for the 10 years after, I would say, depending on the availability of feedstock. For the discussion for refuel aviation, food feed crop are excluded at the present time. I don't know if it will be the case for the final text, but it's excluded, meaning that you can only use waste and residues from a certain annex called Annex 9 in order to produce SAF. It's quite an issue for many countries, because waste and residues, it's good things to valorize when you have local waste and residues, but the risk is to produce waste and residues on purpose just to be compliant with a target. So the balance is not easy. And I would say that it's important to keep some flexibility for feedstock between the different sectors, and to see which feedstock will go much more for one outlet or for the other one. And regulation can help, but regulation should not do everything, because you have the same farmers on the same first transformation of feedstock for different markets. So we also need to have a balance between the different markets, because it's an opportunity when there is a difficulty on one market to be able to be a player on the other one. So complex question.
Okay, so thank you. The next question is from Marine Lequin. It's a big question, so
okay.
I will start. As fuel prices are high, there has been a lot of discussions within governments on reducing biofuel incorporation targets at national levels, even leading to changes sometimes. Sweden, for example. As public opinion is pushing for a reduction of oil production, while demand might not reduce as fast, is there a risk for fuel prices to remain high, and these discussions and decisions to be further pursued on the long term?
It has been discussed at national and at European level, but what we explained first is if you reduce biodiesel consumption, when you are French, you import more diesel fuel from Russia. So it's not a solution for the price, because biodiesel sector has been there for years. But the question, it's a replacement of 7% of biodiesel by 7% of additional import. So I would say it's the first part of the answer, and it's a case for dependency with diesel fuel. Second part of the answer is, of course, what there is not only a dependency of oil from Russia, you also have another dependency, which is protein from Ukraine. So when you produce biodiesel, I explained that you produce protein. And the big prices were also on protein sector for farmers, because for animal feed, the prices have increased because there was no supply from Ukraine. And Ukraine is a big supplier of animal feed in Europe. So the question of balance is, it has been discussed in France. Of course, there was no, the decision was even, the question was, should we increase the target in order to substitute more diesel fuel? And I can tell you that our answer was no, we need stability. Everything is moving, we need stability, do not increase. In other countries, it has been discussed. I think only 1 or 2 countries have decided to reduce their target, and especially for next year. On that European level, during the revision of a renewable energy directive, the question was pointed out, and it has been discussed because the argument was to say, you know, for biofuel, when you use veg oil for biofuel, when the prices of veg oil for food are increasing, maybe it's better to reduce the target. We need also some visibility as industry. It's the first point. And you say, okay, but if prices are decreasing, you agree that we increase the target. I said, no, just on one way. So it has been rejected by European Parliament. So this debate is always important, but I think as industrial player integrated and in different market, food, feed, biofuel, we try to find the best balance for the future and for the long term.
Thank you. The next question, it's from Thierry Destruot. So the question is, we see you compute GHG, from farms in your analysis. What about other impact parameters like eutrophication, acidification, or maybe water usage? Are these significant parameters to take into consideration also?
Okay. Yes, environmental parameters are important to be taken into account. I made a focus on GHG because there are a lot of questions of GHG, but for biofuel production and for feedstock for biofuel, there are sustainability criteria on biodiversity, on the impact on land use change or not. You can produce in certain zone, not in other. You need to be controlled and certified. So yes, many parameters are part of sustainability criteria, even in the regulation. Maybe not all, but a lot of them are part of it. On concerning water consumption, I think it's not one parameter inside the RED directive, but it's an important parameter, especially now. What I can tell you is that there is no irrigation for rapeseed and sunflower, but the question is there, especially after this summer, which we are still in summer today, almost in November in France. So question of water is very important, but not only for energy usage, globally for production. Yeah.
The next question is from Dalbena Sétienne. Does the biofeedstock incorporated in F10, F30 qualify for the RED obligation?
Can you repeat, please?
Does the biofeedstock incorporated in F10 and F30 qualify for the RED obligation?
Good question. It's not sure because I'm not sure that it is. I will answer. It's not part of French legislation. You are allowed to put biodiesel inside heating oil, but I'm not sure that it would be counted for the target. We need to see the European regulation text for this point, but at the present time, I'm quite sure that in the French legislation, it does not count for the target. Yeah.
Okay. There is a question from Lisa Garot. What is your opinion on the competitiveness of SAF? A plane travels the world and can refuel anywhere. How can biofuels be competitive against current fuels? Do we expect a worldwide regulation on SAF?
So biofuels, they will never be competitive compared to price of jet fuel. Why? Because jet A1, which is a fossil fuel used for for aviation is it is the cheapest fuel as there is no tax. At worldwide level, it is the only fuel without any tax. So there will be no competition between biofuels and fossil fuel, but at the same time, we need to find solutions that would be acceptable, meaning that it will have an impact on the ticket price, but it should be affordable for aviation sector and for final consumer. But decarbonization on energy transition, they have a price, and it has to be done. So the zero impact, zero price transition, I would say it's quite a dream, and that's also why I think that aviation sector is almost the last transport sector to be targeted with mandatory targets. And just an additional, sorry, answer, yes. At international level, it's quite sure with CORSIA, with there are big international associations which are thinking about decarbonization, and I'm quite sure that what will be done at European level will have an impact at an international level.
Okay, so thank you for all these technical answers. And now there is a question. It was from me and from a lot, I think, a fresh graduated student. So about the opportunities at AVRIL, we want to know which profiles are currently requested and if there is any vision for the coming years.
Okay. So for AVRIL, I would answer that when I was an intern at AVRIL, the first profile was to be an agronomist. You know, I was quite strong with IFP School, you know, master. Now it's very different. We need profiles, we need technical profiles, but we need also business profile. We need all profile because in order to ensure our development is for energy sectors, but all sectors in energy, for food sector, for feed sector, for chemistry sector. So I would say you have opportunity in France, in Europe, at international level, in Africa, with, I would say, all profiles as soon as you are open to integrate a very wide group. Why not because of the size of the group, but because development are very fast. You know, now we are more than 7,000 people. When I entered, I think we were 200. So opportunities are there, especially for energy and for chemistry, because we want to be, we are a European leader for chemistry from Belgium, and I think that we will continue to develop this sector. So in terms of profile, technical profiles are important because many people consider that industry is not technical, industry is technical. It doesn't mean that you will do technical job during all your career, because my main job now is lobbying. I would have never imagined to do lobbying. So when you enter in AVRIL, you can go quite everywhere in terms of position in terms of sector.
Thank you for this answer. And last but not least, and after your studies at IFP School and your professional career, what advice or recommendation would you give to IFP School students today?
So what I would say, my career is not finished yet, so I don't know for the second part of my career. But my advice would be first to do something that you want to do, not because it's well to have this position or this position. And then to consider all the aspects, technical aspect, regulatory aspect, stakeholders, life cycle analysis, environment, because those aspects are together for every position. Even if you're not an expert in one or the other, you will need to deal with all those aspects. So to remain open, and to remain open, is also the possibility to have very nice opportunities. What I would say, I think that now it's not feasible to have a linear career, but just to have different experience inside the same company or outside, but to be open to new positions, which are not maybe the most comfortable position. You know, for example, for me, I'm very proud to have been able to contribute for development of biodiesel, but I had a technical background. And one day when my boss told me, you know, you will develop a business with Oleo 100, I said, oh, no. He said, oh, yes, it's an opportunity. I said, okay, if you tell me it's an opportunity, I will do, and I will learn. And every time you learn something new, you use it for the next position. And at the end, I think it's, for me, it was what was the best. Yeah.
Thank you for this presentation and for all these answers, and to be the role model for women empowerment. I would say that, yes. So thank you. And now I want to thank you and to say have a nice evening, and to give the floor to Madame Lalanne.
Thank you very much, Kristell.
Sorry, to the Dean, of IFP School.
And thank you for the moderation of this conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristell, for this really very interesting talk, and for the advice you give to our students. Thank you to all for the question and the interesting discussion. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, November 24th. We will have the pleasure to welcome François-Michel Colonard. François-Michel is a reservoir geoscience and engineering graduate, class 2005, and he will address the following topics: lithium, a new industry from exploration to refined product. So thank you, Kristell, once more time.
Thank you very much for the organization of
and for your loyalty to IFP School. And I hope seeing you soon.
Okay.
So have a good evening.
Good evening.